All right, let's go over muscle strength. And so, what is muscle strength? And it's the maximum contractile force against a resistance. That's just a rough idea. That's a definition for you. Most commonly, or more commonly, you do a 1 rep max on bench press. So let's say you hop on bench press, you throw on a bunch of weight that you think you can lift one time, and you're able to do 1 rep with that, but no more. Then that would be your 1 rep max. If you can do 2 or 3 reps with it, that is not your 1 rep max. That's a dangerous way to do it, and you want to make sure that you have a spotter if you use that method. Most of your common 1RM testing are bench press or squat. Those are the two most common that you're going to see personal trainers use. You may see it on deadlift, row. You could do 1RM testing for any lift, but the most common ones to measure muscle strength would be bench press and squat. So you have an estimated 1 rep max formula, and so you can plug in weight times reps, get that first, multiply that by 0.0333, and then add that to weight. And that'll give you an estimate of 1 rep max. That's safer. And there's also a chart where you can look at the number of reps you did for a given weight, and it's kind of like playing Battleship where those two meet. That's going to be your estimated 1 rep max. If you do reps, try to keep it under 10. Don't rep it out for like 100 times. Get a weight that's kind of tough for you to do 8 to 10 times to use this formula. It'll be a better estimate. So types of strength training. So you have pyramid, where you build up. So start off light, move a little heavier, do that with less reps, and then you go up. That's your traditional pyramid program. Then you have a reverse pyramid. So instead of starting off light, you start off heavy, do a couple of reps. A little bit more dangerous to do that, especially if you're not warmed up. And then you have periodic overload, and that's where you work out with a certain amount of weight over a given time, and you're doing a set amount of repetitions with it, and then you slowly try to trick the body. And so once you get to a plateau where it's really tough to improve, you may only put, and I know they don't make these, you have to make them yourself, these little 1-pound plates. Most plates are 2.5, so if you put that on each side, you're increasing by 5 pounds. But if you want to do periodic overload and you're already at a plateau, it's best to have little 1-pound weights that you can add on, and then you're only increasing the total by 2 pounds, and you slowly trick the body. Eccentric or negatives, so that's negative repetitions. So I talked about this in the last video, where you're using the negative repetition for strength training. So I gave the example of the person that did reps of just lowering their body to do pull-ups, and eventually by the end of the semester they were able to do 4 full pull-ups that they had never been able to do before. Or somebody on bench press that has a spotter that gets to a sticking point. They still may do repetitions of 10 with that weight, but they can't get past that sticking point. So they lower it, which is the negative repetition, and then they have somebody help them past the sticking point. That is also used in strength training. That can be done on bench press. It can be done on squat. So then you have compound muscle groups. And this is what I recommend for any beginner that doesn't really know where to start and wants to have an impact on their metabolism. So if you did bench press, you're going to hit pectoralis major, you're going to hit the anterior portion of the deltoid, and you're going to hit the triceps. And so that's going to hit 3 muscle groups with 1 activity. Then if you moved over to squat, you're hitting quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, gastrocnemius. Again, another compound lift, meaning that we're hitting some major muscle groups with 1 activity. But then we need to balance out the upper body because we did pushing activities, so now we're going to do pulling activities. So your rows are going to hit every major muscle group in the back and your biceps. So if you didn't have a lot of time in a gym, and you wanted to have a huge impact on your metabolism by putting on lean mass, these are the 3 activities you would at least want to do. So you can get in and out and do 3 sets of whatever reps pretty quickly, and then move on to your cardio if you wanted to. So safety. Machines are a lot safer. I mean, if you don't have any experience in there and you don't have somebody to spot you, machines are going to be your best bet. So it's all based on activity level. What did you do before you started your program were you already active? That's important because you don't want to just jump right in. You want to slowly build up. Age is a huge and important factor. So if you're really young, you got to worry about metaphyseal plates when it comes to strength training. If you're really old, you got to worry about straining those muscles and tearing those muscles. And what is your current fitness level? So all of those play into safety. So right here I have an example of bench press. Well, if you're worried or you don't have a spotter, then you may want to go with chest press. Or at least if you're going to use free weights and don't have a spotter, you can use dumbbells because you won't be stuck underneath the weight. But there is still the risk of injury without a spotter because you're going to have to throw those weights out to the side, and you may not have the flexibility to do that without tearing a muscle. So you really still need a spotter even with dumbbells. And same thing with squats. So if you don't have a spotter and you don't want to get stuck underneath that barbell or have that weight come crashing down on you because you can't lift it back up, then leg press is a good alternative, or dumbbells. Just make sure you don't drop the dumbbells on your toes. It's just hard to hold enough weight for squats. Like if you're working out with 315, you're probably not going to be able to find dumbbells because we're talking about muscle strength here. We're not talking about muscle endurance. So this is going to be heavy weight. So dumbbells can be problematic when it comes to strength training for the lower body. Metaphyseal plates, I talked about that a little bit when we talked about safety, but we've got to worry about the growth plates. So if you're training somebody that's young, we don't want to put too much pressure on those growth plates because we can cause them to close early. So if you've ever seen somebody that's done a lot of strength training early on before they went through puberty or while they were going through puberty, sometimes it can stunt their growth, and it's because these growth plates have stopped growing. And for a typical person, they're not going to stop growing until they're out of puberty, so right around age 18 for a lot of males, but these may not close until like age 25. It just depends on the person. So the growth plates allow the long bones to continue to lengthen. So tibia, femur, radius, ulna, humerus, all of those that really have an impact on our height and the length of our arms. If we do too much heavy weight too early, we can cause that to close. So really, strength training should be avoided at a young age. That also happens in because of the repeated trauma that you see in gymnastics. The metaphyseal plates may close early. A lot of times that's because they've broken the bones close to the growth plates, or that repeated trauma impact will cause them to close early. So spotting is important when it comes to safety, especially with free weights. So you want to make sure that you have a spotter. Negative repetitions, it can be used in strength training, and it also helps you on your form. You have another person to kind of make sure that you're keeping proper form. And form will also save you from getting injured, because an example would be like if you were using dumbbells for lunges and you kept looking down. Well, that looking down instead of looking straight ahead will cause you to lean over, and you're more likely to throw out your lower back. Plyometric exercises, you see this a lot in gymnastics, you see it in sprinting. The advantage is that you can improve your power, you can improve your speed because it's sport specific. It's explosive, but you don't want to do these that often. Once, maybe twice a week, because they cause a lot of trauma, not just to the muscles, but also to the growth plates, also to the bones, and to the ligaments and tendons. So the disadvantage is there's an increased risk of injury, but they're really good for sport performance. And the reason they cause injury, especially to the muscles, is because they can activate a muscle spindle. So a muscle spindle is a type of proprioceptor. So there's two main ones that we really talk a lot about in exercise physiology. So the muscle spindle tells the muscle to contract. And so let's say you're doing a bunch of vertical jumps and you're right at the bottom of that jump about to spring up. So you went down as far as you can, and the muscle spindle activates too soon at the bottom of that stretch of the muscle. It can tear the muscle, or if you're sprinting really hard, they can cause the muscle to tear because it contracts when it's not supposed to contract, or right when the muscle can't lengthen anymore. Then we have another one called the Golgi tendon organ. And this is the reason we don't stretch. We do a warm-up before our activity. So the Golgi tendon organ tells the muscle to relax. It's a safety mechanism. So pretend that you're doing arm curls and you're curling that weight, and you get all the way down at the end, or you're about to lift and you've felt that muscle just relax and you couldn't complete the lift. That's the Golgi tendon organ preventing you from tearing that muscle away from where it's attached, or from tearing the muscle itself. So the reason we don't want to do a lot of static stretching prior to exercise or sport performance is because it can slow down the contractile rate of the muscle. So if we're trying to do muscle strength and we do a lot of stretching before and we've activated the Golgi tendon organ, it can inhibit rapid and fast contractions. So we don't want that. So we'll do our stretching at the end. So you warm up first, you do your main activity, your strength activity, and then you do your stretching at the end so it doesn't inhibit rapid contraction that you want in strength training. So a lot of people think, well, I need to do my stretching so I don't get injured when I work out. There's been a lot of research on this subject, and there is no difference based on the research that we see between a person or a group of people going in cold, meaning they didn't do anything, they just started working out, and people stretching. But there is a huge difference between those two groups and people that warm up, that get adequate blood supply to the muscle. So a warm-up could be dynamic stretching, where you're kicking and just moving the leg through a range of motion, but not static stretching, not PNF stretching, not ballistic stretching. We don't want that. Something where we just get blood flow. It could be as simple as walking if we're going to use the lower body. All right, tearing a muscle. So we have different grades of tears, and I'm not going to read each one of these. It kind of gives you an idea of how long it takes to heal. But grade 3 we want to avoid. So this would be an example of grade 3. That's Chuck Liddell. He was training, and he was trying to sprawl. An individual had a hold of his leg. Well, he sprawled with one leg, but the other leg stayed because the other person had a hold of it, and he tore his hamstring. So that would be grade 3. And you can see all the damage that was done. So common strain injuries are hamstring. That's a huge one. You always hear people saying, well, I pulled a hammy, quadricep muscle, calf strain, groin strain, rotator cuff, mainly because you have a huge range of motion in the rotator cuff, so you're more likely to have an injury, because once you start to feel pain, it's too late. You've gone too far. And so it gives you an idea. Rupturing the long head of the bicep. Have you ever seen somebody do like deadlifts or arm curls and you see their bicep detach? So that's rupturing the muscle, tearing the tendinous attachment away from where it's attached. That would be a grade 3 for sure. So muscle strength specificity. So this is sport specificity. You're training for a particular sport. So sprinting will help you out. Powerlifting will help you out. Plyometrics will give you that explosive power. But what do you need it for? Like if you're a sprinter, most of your activities should be sprinting. It's not that you don't do any powerlifting for the lower body, but the majority of the activities are sport specific. If you're in gymnastics, most of your activities are going to be that event. You may do a little powerlifting, a little strength training to help out, but most of it's going to be sport specific. If you're going to be a power lifter, you're going to focus on powerlifting. Majority of the activities, it's not that you don't have supplemental activities, but 80-90% of your activities are going to be strength training activities. You definitely don't want to do anything outside of muscle strength. Like a power lifter doesn't want to go out and run a marathon. A sprinter doesn't want to go out and run a marathon. It's actually going to inhibit your performance. You'll never get to the point that you could, to the top level, to the elite level, if you're doing activities outside your program, or outside your health-related component, I should say. All right, so here is a last video. I showed you a chart and kind of explained how these were all linked. This is just muscle strength and how it ties in to the health-related components. So it is a health-related component, so it's muscle strength. The muscle fiber type that you're going to develop, if all you ever did were muscle strength activities, you're going to develop more fast-twitch glycolytic. Those are the type 2B. You're going to have a larger motor neuron. These are going to be events that last about 10 or 12 seconds because they're all-out explosive activities. Things like powerlifting or sprinting, and you're going to use the ATP-CP system because it's such a short time and it's all out that you're running off your immediate source of ATP. So remember the example I had in the muscle video, talked about the chicken having all white meat in the chest or in the breast, can't fly very far. That is muscle strength. 10 or 12 seconds, they're running off the ATP they have supplied or stored in the muscle. All right, supplements. So creatine phosphate actually relates to what we just talked about. So we've got the phosphate gets broken off. When the ATP gets used up, you're left with ADP. D is in dog. But we need to replenish those stores. So we break that high energy covalent bond, pop that phosphate back on, our ATP stores are replenished. That's, in a general way, that's how creatine phosphate works. I'm sure chemists would freak out over that description, but that, in a nutshell, that's good enough for us to know. Nitrous oxide, that's more vasodilation, causing the more blood supply to get to the muscles. And protein, we talked about this in the nutrition video. 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight should maintain the muscle mass you have, as long as you're not some elite level endurance athlete or bodybuilder. You start wanting to gain some muscle. For the average person, you're going to take in 1.8 grams of protein to increase your body weight, or 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight to increase muscle mass. For the average person, and you spread that out through the day, you're not eating that all at one time. 20, 30 grams, maybe 30 to 40, depending on how big you are, per serving. All right, performance enhancing drugs. Anabolic steroid hormone, testosterone, is going to help us increase muscle mass, but there's a lot of side effects that go along with those anabolic effects. So androgenic effects, so you get those male traits that you may see in women, or males may exhibit more than they had before. It's going to help athletes recover faster, and it reduces muscle damage. Those are positives. There is a whole range of side effects and dangers associated with testosterone, especially if you don't take it right under the guidance of a doctor. So men may develop breasts, baldness, shrunken testicles, infertility, impotence, and enlargement of the prostate gland. And one that's not listed on here, and this goes for men and women, are blood clots. So women, deeper voice, large clitoris, increased body hair, baldness, infrequent or absent periods. So those are some of the side effects and dangers associated. And it's not limited to those. There are more. Here's some more side effects that are for both genders. So we have acne, tendinitis, tendon rupture, even though you may heal faster. That's mainly for the explosiveness that you may receive from it. Liver problems, so you may have, if somebody looks at your blood work, they may think there may be issues with your liver. Increase LDL, bad cholesterol, and this is also in conjunction with increased clotting. So more likely to develop heart disease if this is used over a long period of time. Decrease high-density lipoprotein. So this is a good cholesterol that helps clean up those arteries so that the LDL doesn't stay and eventually develop plaques or help develop the plaques. High blood pressure, heart circulatory problems, aggressive behavior, rage, violence, and we've all heard about that. psychiatric disorders, and a lot of that is associated with aggressive behavior, but also depression, drug dependence, and depending on how they're getting their testosterone, it could increase the risk for HIV, hepatitis if they're injecting the drugs and using dirty needles, and inhibited growth and development, so closing those growth plates early. So there's a whole host of problems that are associated with it. So this is muscle strength. Next video, we're going to talk about muscle endurance.